how to run a workplace investigation. Now, also many thanks for taking the time to answer the pre-webinar survey from the last few days. It's been really helpful, and we'll incorporate that into our talk today. So just very, very briefly to introduce myself, I'm a principal resolution consultant with the business. My name is Owen Bubbers, and I'm also the leader of the team of consultants that go around the business that work on our investigations, our training and our mediations. I'm also joined by my colleague Elaine Smith. Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Owen. Hi, my name is Elaine Smith and I'm one of the resolution consultants. So my background is a bit of HR and some investigations and that kind of thing as well. Plus I train our investigations course, practical investigation skills course.
Fantastic. And so a little about TCM, we're a consultancy. We work all over the UK, and we're specialists in working with organisations from all different backgrounds, public and private sector, on how to manage investigations. So training investigators and managers to run best practice investigations. We carry out, as we'll talk a bit later on, investigation services, neutral evaluation services, and also specialising in mediation. So how to help organisations and individuals manage conflict more effectively, both in the room as trainers, but also as practitioners. So we'll be having a few questions along the way as we go, but let's get started. And our agenda for today is going to be focused on several things about investigations. One, the legal context and the burden of proof. Really critical for our investigators to know all about this. The role of the investigator, conducting an effective investigation, how to support your investigators. This came up as a critical part of the pre-webinar survey, as well as some top tips, food for thought. There's a few moments we'll spend on solutions and services from the TCM Group to give you a little more information about how you can take things forward in terms of what we have to offer, and how that can impact your organisations. And if we have time, a few bits of Q&A. So without further ado, let's move on. So the first thing is the legal context, the burden of proof in workplace investigations. And the first thing to make absolutely clear is to say, of course, that there is no legal standard for investigations. And it might strike some, especially those who are new to investigations, that it seems a little strange given how consequential investigations can be for an organisation. So let's just reaffirm some of the fundamentals. When we're looking at when an organisation wants to determine whether investigation is fair, has reached a certain threshold of quality, we look to the Burchell Test. Now, essentially, there are three parts to the Burchell Test. And essentially what it's about is understanding, identifying what is a reasonable investigation, what is reasonable. And there's been some interpretation through the Court of Appeal on this, but in a nutshell, there are three elements to it. One, to satisfy the Burchell Test, the employer needs to demonstrate they had a genuine belief in the employee's guilt. Number two, it had reasonable grounds for that belief. And three, the organisation has to demonstrate that at the time it held that belief, the employer had carried out as much an investigation as was reasonable in the circumstances. Now, the work that I do, I work with, and Elaine does as well, work with a lot of experienced investigators who actually aren't really that aware with the legal context. So what does reasonable mean? What does a reasonable investigation look like? And just very, very briefly, the Court of Appeal came to offered some interpretation on this in the last few years in a case called Strester versus Genesis Housing Association Limited. And what they came to the conclusion was that actually, and the good news for employers, was that the reasonableness of the investigation as a whole is what's key. So an employer doesn't have to demonstrate that they investigated every single claim put forward by an employee who's under investigation. What matters is that as a whole, the investigation seemed to be reasonable. So again, that's in a support part for employers. I think it's important to be aware of. The other element, of course, as well, just very briefly, is the idea of natural justice. Now, I'm not an employment lawyer, but essentially in a nutshell, natural justice refers to the right to defend yourself and to be heard in a free, fair and impartial way. Okay, so to recap, there's no legal standard for investigations, but the employer must satisfy the Burchell Test. Otherwise, even if it has a potentially fair reason for dismissal, an inadequate investigation can render any subsequent dismissal unfair. So really important to be aware of that. So moving on, before we come to the role of the investigator, we'd like to put our first poll question out to the group. Elaine?
Yes, well, the first question that we'd like to ask is, have you ever been formally trained in workplace investigations? And the reason we ask this is because quite often we find that the people we train haven't had any sort of training in workplace investigations. So we were curious to see what your feedback would be on that.
Okay, so we'll give you just a few more seconds. Some of you already answered a lot. That's great. A few more seconds before we close it. So give another 10 seconds or so. Great, thank you very much. So the results are in. And the question of, have you ever been formally trained in workplace investigation? And the answers are as follows. 77% of you have never been trained formally. 23% of you have. And for me, when I'm in the training room working with new and experienced investigators, I find the vast majority haven't actually received formal training. And more often than not, people are told, you know, here's an investigation, crack on with it and get going. But of course, we know it's a lot more complex than that. So thank you very much. So let's now move on to the role of the investigator. So, first of all, thank you. So first of all, this is a very important role, and I think it's fair to say that for an investigator, there's a lot of responsibility. I think it's a pressured role, and I think it's obviously a role that's hard for people to talk about, given the nature of the confidentiality. So it's a big responsibility. So what is it in a nutshell? So one, first of all, is to identify information and evidence which supports or rebuts any allegations that have been raised, rather than to build a case against the employee. By doing this, one can be clear about what the allegation or concern is, how serious it is, and whether or not, on the balance of probability, there appears to be a case to answer. So of course, appreciate this to be familiar for many of you, but to be absolutely clear, the role of the investigator is not to build a case against the employee. You're not the judge and jury. It's to identify the information and evidence which supports allegations or rebuts, on the basis of that to determine whether, on the balance of probability, there appears to be a case to answer. Now, of course, critical to this role is to be impartial. This is something that as mediators, as trainers, investigators, we're very well aware of. The fact we all have emotional hooks and triggers that set us off. There might be biases and prejudices that we all have. Maybe the person you're interviewing reminds you of an old manager, perhaps, who knows. But the key thing is we all have these, but we need to be aware of what those are. And that's what we mean by hooks and triggers. So a trigger is something that sets you off, emotional trigger. And the hook, essentially, think of someone going fishing. They put the bait on the line and they're trying to reel you in. So being very mindful of people have their own agendas sometimes in the room, our need for impartiality. And I think it's a skill that we have to keep working on day in, day out, whether you've been investigating for 5 minutes or 5 years or 20 years. Also, another key challenge, we know how busy we all are, especially managers who are taking part in investigations. You've got to balance that need between working quickly, keeping the immediate sense, we know that memories fade quickly, but also being very, very thorough, meticulous record keeping. And there's always going to be a bit of tension around that. What else? Well, we know that organising, the logistical side is very important, but also undertaking effective interviews. So when you get in the room, you're thinking, what are the questions to ask? You're using your judgment. You're remaining impartial. You're naming the elephant in the room if that's important. And we know there are some different questions there, which can be quite intimidating. Finally, of course, we're there to prepare a final report that can withstand internal and external scrutiny. So, of course, as an investigator, the more meticulous you are, the more thorough and rigorous you are in your note-keeping, your organisational skills, your report writing, the better the final product would be. And, of course, finally, you may or may not be asked to prepare some recommendations. That doesn't mean you should say what should be happening, what shouldn't to that person, if there's a case to answer. You're putting all recommendations through. Might be training, mediation, or policy improvement, to name a few.
Well, Owen, I've actually got a question that I get asked a lot on the courses, on the investigation skills courses. And a lot of people ask me that during an investigation, what happens if more is exposed? So, for instance, a different employee of the organisation may have done something completely unrelated, but that's come out during all your interview stages. What do you do then?
That's a great question. I mean, it's always going to be, you have to exercise your judgment, number one. Something that I would say would be that, remember, part of your role is to establish quality terms of reference very early on. Mm-hmm. And those are your anchor. Those are your beacon, your guiding star, if you will. So I think always you've got to go back to those terms of reference, make sure they're robust. And it's all, of course, when it's very easy, I think, when you're in the spur of the moment, you're in the middle of investigation, and something comes up, and it may well need to be investigated. The question for you is, does that affect and impact this investigation? And if it does, how do you manage that? Yeah, okay. So terms of reference, make them really clear. If in doubt, I'd say don't put it on your shoulders to answer that question. If you need support, go back to the point of contact and clarify and let them make that decision with your recommendation. Because it can be easy, I think, in the heat of the moment, you hear something and you go off. I'm sure a few of us heard the story of someone who got an investigator, got the terms of reference, in the process of investigating and interviewing, something comes up, and they go off and write that report, and actually it doesn't answer the terms of reference that were originally given.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to conducting an effective investigation. Now, I think hopefully this is quite self-explanatory, but briefly let's go through those principles before we look at some of the preparation. First of all, we need to be very thorough and rigorous, as we mentioned already, within boundaries. So we need to recognize what we can do and what we can't do as investigators. We obviously work with what we've got, time boundaries, organizational support, organizational policies. Be respectful as well. Recognizing also this is a formal process. We are impartial. We've talked about the challenges of that. Recognizing and respecting natural justice, and also being very consistent. And by consistent, I mean that when you start your process, you end it in the note-taking, the templates you're using, the documentation you're using, how you're treating each person that comes for you, that you're doing in a very respectful, consistent, impartial way.
Okay, well, we'd like to ask you another question at this point. We have this question as well that we were thinking about. Does everyone in your organization who undertake investigations follow the same processes? So is there a consistency within your organization amongst your investigators?
Within that, to what extent do you have confidence that your investigators are following the same procedures? Because clearly that's important. Let's give you a few more seconds for that. We've had some good responses here. Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, thank you very much. So the results are in. And on that question, 61% of you say yes, you are confident that your staff are following the same procedures and processes. But an interesting 39% have said no. Now, clearly, this is a yes or no poll, but that's a substantial minority and worth considering in terms of the organisation having confidence in their staff and having the training, skills, and the expertise to deliver a really thorough, rigorous investigation. Okay, thank you very much. So now moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk about preparation. There's a lot we could say for effective investigations, but preparation, critical, and that's what we're going to focus on for a minute now. As I mentioned earlier, one of the critical things is to get the terms of reference right. I remember the first investigation I ever took part in, and we had initially arranged, my colleague and I, to do 2 or 3 interviews in the course of a kind of a morning. In the end, we met with the respondent, and it became clear that the terms of reference that we had agreed with our point of contact, actually there was some disconnect there. So in the end, we spent all the time actually clarifying what those were. And of course, it was an investment worth making, because later on, it meant that we have confidence going forward in what we're actually there to do as external consultants. So we're taking the time. Obtaining relevant policies and procedures. And the truth is, if on our training courses, it happens whereby, an organization's updated its policies. We're not always on top of those, if we're absolutely honest. So make sure you get up-to-date policies and procedures. And of course, it's up to the organization to make sure they're regularly reviewing and updating. That's critical. What else? Well, establish a timetable for the work. But as we said, be flexible. Plan to be flexible as well. All right, things are going to change. Things will come up. That's unavoidable. The question is how you then respond to it. I'd say plan initial interviews. Decide which order you want to meet people in. Also, what questions do you want to ask? Try and game out what questions you think will be important. And then, of course, you can adapt. Of course, check as well if there's a right to be accompanied in your organization. We'd always encourage that as best practice, but check the fine print there. And of course, check that all the admin is in place. We know that half the battle is organizing the logistics as well as possible. Seek any necessary expert advice and or sources of information. Remember, you're the investigator. This falls on your shoulders, so make sure you get what you need. As I mentioned before, plan to be flexible. Whether it's someone's leave they go on unexpectedly or someone is off sick, just recognize that that's part of the process, okay?
Owen, I'd like to ask another question just before we move on. Do you have a general idea of how much time we should set aside for an investigation, to undertake an investigation? Is there a rule of thumb, or what is your advice?
It's a great question. You know, I wish I had a perfect answer. I think the truth is you want to keep, conclude an investigation as soon as possible. We know that memories fade. We know that people are busy, and it's important we get that kind of quote unquote immediate sense of the situation as soon as possible. But we also know that our investigators rarely are just there doing investigations. They have a whole load of other responsibilities, often involving managing staff. So that's often one of the biggest challenges. How do you balance a whole range of competing priorities? Also, people go and leave. Sometimes the wheels of an organization move slower than we'd like. So I'd say as soon as you possibly can, but remember that balance between being thorough and quick as well.
Okay.
So I'd rather give a specific answer. That's what I go for. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you.
So let's move on to support for investigators. Now, as managers, as leaders in the organizations, you have a critical part to play. We recognize, of course, it's a tough job being an investigator. Not that many people understand what it's actually like and the responsibilities involved. So number one, as you mentioned before, invest in training for all investigators. Most of the people that I work with and Elaine works with have never done formal training, even if they've been doing it for 20 years. It's worth the investment for something that has such consequences for the organization. Two, organizations need to regularly review and update their policies, processes, and administrative documentation. And if and when they introduce new policies, they're stress testing those to make sure they actually work in practice as well. The nitty-gritty is there. Also, we often assume that we're self-sufficient, we don't take our work home with us. In reality, our experience is that people do. And it's really critical to establish some support networks, encourage CPD opportunities for investigators. It's a lot of responsibility, and people always appreciate being able to talk through a situation with someone in confidence that they trust and respect. I think that's a critical part for us. We really encourage you to take that time to invest in establishing those networks. Also, going back to time, ensure the investigators have the capacity to undertake investigations. In the pre-webinar survey, one of the biggest challenges you talked about was actually, where's the time coming from? It's time intensive, it's resource intensive. Some organizations consider protected time for their staff, others don't. I think what you need to be very clear about is if you ask someone to do an investigation, and if it's part of in addition to their day job, you're giving them the tools to do the job, and it does require time. It does require time. So we need to be upfront about that. And also finally, be open to suggestions for development and improvement in light of investigations work. So whether it be in the training room, in the investigation skills course that we run, or actually when someone's out investigating, an organization can learn so much from this work that it can take away. So we need to be very open to that. Okay? So we're doing well for time. We're going to keep on going through to our top tips. Now, there's clearly a lot we could all say, but here are a few that we've drawn out. One, work as quickly as you can, as said before. That immediate sense of a situation, as we know, is very, very precious. Keep meticulous notes and records throughout the investigation. We here at TCM use a lot of set templates that are very simple but very, very clear, enable you just to work with them very well when you haven't got much time. So work out what those are. Codify them if you're an organization. Establish robust terms of reference early on. Get those right and you are helping yourself out no end. Reflect, remain impartial, and acknowledge one's own emotional triggers. There's no way for us to always stop our biases, but half the battle is to recognize what those are and be upfront. So when you see them coming around that hill, you can hope you can do something about it. Okay. Also, seize opportunities for appropriate support, as we talked about. We often like to think we can handle things on our own, but you know what? I think it pays to be able to talk in a conducive, supportive, confidential environment with people who understand what it's all about. Even when there's nothing new to report, keep communicating with the parties. I think we've all been there where no news is not good news. Silence, there's a vacuum that's filled, and that breeds a sense of uncertainty. Even if there's nothing new to update, people appreciate being told and reassured where they are with the process. A small thing, it goes a long way. And in the end, be prepared to ask the hard questions, and sometimes yes to name the elephant in the room. That might be tough emotions that you're hearing. It might be anger that someone's brought into the room. Maybe there's one particular question that has an edge to it. That can be very hard for the most experienced investigator. But remember, that's part of your job. So is it about demonstrating certain skills, summarizing, naming strong emotions, all these skills that we need to get right as investigators? Be prepared to ask these hard questions. And finally, remain empathic and respectful. And just remember, you might find yourself the subject of investigation one day. Now, I'm fortunate. I've not been on the receiving end one, but I can imagine that it must be stressful, it must be incredibly difficult. So let's remember, no matter how experienced we are, that it's tough being in that position. No matter what someone might be, the allegations might be, we can be respectful, empathic, and keep an open mind, so to be positively skeptical. And then just finally, let's come on to services from the TCM Group. So we want to be focused on all the work that we're doing, the skills in the room, but we thought it might give a bit of information about what we offer here as specialists in our field. Now, there's quite a lot of writing on that slide, but in a nutshell, we carry a lot of different work, as well as mediations, as well as training courses in conflict and dispute resolution. We offer an full investigation service using specialists. We also offer training courses, in particular our practical investigation skills training course. It's 2 days. I would say that it's at its best as a very practical, down-to-earth course on how to manage an investigation from start to finish according to best practice. We've got a lot of documentation that's very helpful, excellent templates that really makes it crystal clear. And we have a lot of people who are very experienced, some who are very new. So it's not about employment law, it's about fact-finding and the practical skills. We use a lot of variety of learning styles, experiential role play, etc. And you get to work with a full case study on the second day. So it really allows you to test those skills in practice. And finally as well, as investigators, we're impartial, we're structured. We have a careful process with a clearly written report, okay? We use a variety of skills to make sure we get the best out of the investigation. We're on a very much quality service, but we're informed by being thorough, transparent, respectful, rigorous, and effective. And of course, we're very happy to answer any questions offline in terms of any service, but also any particular issues and challenges that you might be facing in your work at the moment. Maybe you have a particular case that's on your mind and there's a few questions about how you're going to go about it or who you might choose to use in your team. So just a little bit of information there, our open access public training courses. You can see we have some courses coming up in September and November for investigation skills, as well as more broadly, managing difficult conversations in October. Our National Certificate Workplace Mediation training is in November and December, and there's an accredited course, as well as a shorter practical mediation skills in October and December. And that practical mediation skills course really gives people a good grounding in the mediation process and some of the challenges and skills that we face in that environment. So on that note, I want to say thank you very much for taking part in this webinar. We hope it's been helpful. You can see our email addresses are there. It's owen.bubbers@thetcmgroup.com and Elaine Smith at thetcmgroup.com. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you very much for your time. Have a good rest of your day, and we look forward to being in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.